He and his wife, Candyce, who is also joining us, of course, are members of the Committee for Future Generations, which has been working to address the risk of the nuclear and uranium industry that imposes the people in the North and worldwide. Marius has supported many frontline actions on Turtle Island over the last 40 years. Marius, welcome. And the table is all yours.
Greetings to everybody. I'm kind of afflicted with a cold right now, so if you don't hear me, please let me know. I'll try to raise up my voice a bit. Kaya nito dana hot in other words, yeah, this is a long time ago. That would give like a time frame when the mining incursions started coming into Dene territory. That's way up in the northern areas. The closest one to us is on our traditional lands at the Key Lake and MacArthur River. And then the other ones are a little bit further northwest. Those ones are closer to another Dene community, which is Wollaston Lake, and then further north, Black Lake, Fond du Lac, Uranium City. The people started to realize that due to misinterpretations of the treaty pacts and agreements, that there would be a lot of sharing going on, but it just didn't happen that way. The corporate world just rolled right in, and it appeared to be a separate activity from, or made to look like a separate activity from any sharing concepts that the Treaty 10, Treaty 8 had with, I think ours is the Dominion of Canada, and Treaty 8 I think is with the Queen. So there's those kind of words are still kind of like we still have to filter through a lot of that alien language that has been used on people who did not speak nor have any message that they could transliterate to the people. It was money, 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 money. A long time ago, our people used to scare us with stories about the Bushmen. Those were prospectors. They had big beards. They roamed all over the north, and once in a while they would get whistled at. So that would be a cause for the elders to tell us, "Oh, you go to bed, or the white man is going to whistle at you." So that sort of understanding where the money seeker became the treaty, and it shouldn't be, it's not supposed to be. So there's a weight or weighing out those concepts as far as treaty and corporate. How can our nation pull the rug out from underneath them? How can we make them realize that the lands that they are desecrating and contaminating, and those kind of words too need a lot of study, because the Dene don't have that radioactivity, except other than to say in other words, the waves are frenzy, or the waves are big. So those kind of words are kind of being tossed around by the people that want to sit back and say, we have to know what those people are up to. what the companies want. How is the Saskatchewan government going to stand with our nation, because we have that supreme law over the corporate, the feds, the province. Those kind of conditions that we need to enforce. When the Dene use that fear concept, you know, the money seeker characterization became implanted into that system, the chief and the council system, where the chief and the council system were being whittled right down, you know, with all the apartheid measurements that had been slowly filtering in from the NRT days, that's up in the 1920s, all the way up to today, when other so-called policies are starting to be implemented. We now are dealing with Land Management Act, the membership, the codes, marriages, all kinds of stuff that started to really make a very confused way of trying to relay our concerns as a nation and as a separate entity from the whole system that's there right in front of us. The Dene used to traverse all that area. I remember my father, when he was a young boy, he told me that the last gathering that he saw, experienced, was sometime after 1910, where all of varied groups from all over the Northwest Territories, Manitoba, Alberta, even into British Columbia, there are still people, all the way down to the coastal areas and into Alaska. So there were a lot of people there, and it was practically the last gathering of Dene people that were in our traditional territories, where they all sat and had to discuss the latest changes that was happening, and that was colonial words coming in, where people were dealing with strange language on top of dealing with plagues. So there was severe die-offs happening all over the north. So it was a very traumatized populace by 1910 or 1906, when our treaty number 10 was signed here, or just a little bit north of us here at Isle Cross. The people were reeling, but not. They also knew that they had to hold the colonial world to their lives and to their supposed language, which they still did not recognize. And if it was recognized, then it had to be, or it came after the residential school experience, excuse me, that came in the 1890s till the 1990s. So that's 100 years of steady indoctrination that did some good in a way, because some of the Dene had to become linguists and retain that language in order to better get a grip and a grasp and conceptualizing the way the white man wanted to impress us with their meaning and their message. It was an overtone of threats, an overtone of direct termination. So, so we strengthened a lot of our, our world scope. The way we have spread out the cultural strength and power of our Dene Nation here amongst the Castillo. That's what we call ourselves. Is to have individuals like myself and a few others that also continue to harangue, to harass, to connect with a lot of other individuals across Saskatchewan and across Canada and the world to bring out more of that power of withstanding the pseudoscience. The physics part of it was already in retention or already held by our people because there was something very, very sacred, as in all other ways they interpreted events and the way the earth messages. It was the medicine. It was in the Aussie, those ways of making sure that whatever words that is being used, whatever spells, whatever ways that the technical expertise is supposed to overwhelm our hold to the sacred concepts of the earth was very, very minimal, and that we stand to at all times. How's that? Yoo-hoo.
Yeah, that was great. I was just wondering, you had mentioned earlier about the treaties or the extraction companies coming up there. Do the treaties do anything to protect communities, and are they even any of those protections even honored by these companies in any way?
I think the concept is kept hidden because of all that activity, all that economic activity, money, possessions, a lot of things that has been used by the colonial world to cover what they know is more powerful than anything that they wish to do on us. To say, hey, we finally got that deed to that land that those guys have been hogging and all this stuff. Well, that sort of way of understanding that some of us are still having to deal with the way our communication is going to have to reach out to a lot of our people who are half Dene and half English speakers. So you have that intermixture of two languages happening. So that kind of confuses a lot of things. So we need to understand that the Treaty 10 that we have, which is only just a little document, but it would require the return of the headman system to bring out, they used to have think tanks a long time ago. And today they are still there. The sense of these headmen and these orators are still there, and they would have to pretty well sit down for the next lengthy period of time to make an assessment of how the colonial world has created this apocalyptic era that we are in. A long time ago, there was this seer that had said, when the white man comes in, it will impact the Dana so hard. It will also impact the earth, and that earth that has been sustaining life and sustaining the aesthetic connection to our people is also going to be very demeaned and made non-existent or irrelevant. So that meant to the elders that yes, we have gone through very, very vast changes from the first ships that moored off the Hudson Bay coast long time ago and built Fort Churchill, and then from there forays into the people of the far north. That's what the Hudson Bay or the Merry Adventurers, Rupert Island people called us, the far north people. They didn't know who we were. But from that time on to the present, all those changes, including the way the Dene that were in the immediate operating vicinity of the Hudson Bay Company also learned the ropes to to handle and also to control a lot of the new dynamics of an economy that was shaping up on our people's land, and to also other close by nations that also were dealing with the colonial settlements that came in. Like south of us were a long time ago were all Blackfoot. There were no Cree. Cree were in eastern Manitoba, Quebec, Ontario. It was only after the fur trade era that demographic shifts started happening, and that's when they moved in. So a lot of our ways of understanding that is made known to us by our seer, the old lady who told us we're going to go through dire times. So that's why I use the word we're in the post-apocalyptic era. So we are the ones that are the survivors. And the last words that lady used was, when all is said and done, the survivors will move north to Cree Lake. And right now, Cree Lake is undergoing in situ operations. But there's more to that prophecy moving north to Cree Lake than just the way it's being interpreted. So a lot of things that need to be brought in on the table amongst the new headman, the new think tankers that will have to make all this assessment, and there will have to be total isolation of any colonial overtones that is so being so implanted into the head that caused a lot of confusion and a lot of sickness.
Is Cree Lake still a viable place to go? Like, is with the changes on the
Um,
land, is there still water and animals and stuff?
Cree Lake is actually a natural fountain lake. Like it gets its water, it's old water from underneath, from under the earth. It's kind of like a fountain comes up. The one that lake beside us here, not too far from here, but 3 or 4 clicks away, is also the same. They're all connected underwater, under the earth. Cree Lake, this one, the one in Suwachotwe, that's in Cold Lake, Alberta. The Dene have said those 3 large bodies of waters are all connected. The one up in Cree Lake, uh, The elders were saying that at some time there's going to be a tremendous water issue. So they the original intent was to keep the companies at bay, but redneck government after redneck government after redneck government, they moved in Regina, and they made their deals behind closed doors. They did anything they want, right to the point of even chief and council saying, "Oh, they're going to do it anyway." You that sort of a defeatism is also part of the colonial sickness. The Cree Lake, according to one of one of my relatives, I call them relatives. We're not related, but the Dene. Well, we are both the same age, and but he was born and raised in Cree Lake. He said it's a big beach area, like beaches all over the place, and it's a huge, huge lake. But he said he can see little tracks sometimes, little people just trooping by. So those kind of things are still very, very relevant to us who were born into the old age-old context of the sacred and the presence of deities and other ways of interpreting the magical or the the reality, the reality long before the white man came. One of the things my grandfather used to say was, in an instant, they would travel across galaxies. So, there's kind of those ways of realizing, you know, something is limiting our potential and our power. So this whole world, the so-called community of man, sitting here doing nothing except making money and contaminating lands and waters. Those kind of things just clearly make us more stronger. We are not going to sit back. We will turn the page because we are indigenous and we are here on our ancient land, and it speaks to us and we speak back to it. So there's a lot of ways of that still exist, that are still in retained. They say that marking the DNA or other ways of trying to say, hey, pass me a link. I want to find out about this. You can't really do that because a lot of our history is not written down. Nobody has said, other than a priest by the name of Petito. He kept a really awesome description of the Dene cosmological world. Like, he got a book written on it, and that meant he adopted the Dene language and interpreted into French what the people were telling him. The way the legends were. How did Dene come about, etc. There are all those questions that make for a curious way of looking back and finding out more around the world. Not just looking back, but looking right here, right now. How would that be strong and relative to our way of saying our power is what they are afraid of? Our existence, right to the last word, termination. We are still here. Cree Lake is, according to my relative, will be strong enough to provide for continued existence. And when I say turn the page, it could be more than just turning a chapter or a story or something else that would be confined within a colonialized way of interpreting the ecologies. That's our medicine. When you say turn the page, it could mean entering other planes of thought, like your thoughts that would bring out that something else is there. You know, my grandfather, he used to say, or a story about my grandfather was where he would collect up some warriors and go clean themselves, and they clean out themselves. And then he would instruct each one of them to pick up a boulder and hold it right there, right around the midriff, and walk into the lake. But he told them, you're going to walk into water way above your head. But at some point, you're going to be told to drop that boulder you're holding. So they would all troop into the water, go the water way above their head, until at some point they dropped it. And then instantly they were not in water anymore. They were in another world, so to speak. You know, the English language is so full of bullshit that I can't really conceptualize what the Danae were accomplishing way back before the whole world came in. So the matter of Cree Lake being brought up there in the midst of all the in situ plans and other radioactive operations around it, I think is going to come to a stand. It's not going to go any further than what they are hoping for. You should see all the junior companies that have laid mining claims all over that area, from BC, from Kelowna. They've laid claims galore all over. The names, I got all the information on that, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's only to say, oh, they're just there as part of our learning, and the way some sacred teachings is being conducted on the wary and the more aware.
Well, thank you for those words, Marius. We are getting some questions in from some of our viewers, but I will save those questions for later, just because I think Candyce and Leona would have some things to add to those things. So, Marius, was there any last thoughts or anything you wanted to share with us before we moved on?
We do this to honor the future people, because they cannot speak at this point. And if we are within our capacity to operate in a very efficient way, such as talking about ways to deal with that impact already, as has been happening in the Black Hills, in the desert lands, in our lands, and in other areas where all the mining has been done. We want to ensure that if they are messing around with that, and they are so secretive that we think that they might be hanging on to some technology that they have developed, or otherwise they are going to come up with some big pyramids that were once built long time ago to clean out the atmosphere, to clean out everything, the whole earth. So those kind of ways of understanding our ways of ensuring that we advance with hope, we advance with power, no matter what.
So true. Hope and power. That's exactly how we have to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Marius. So just to keep the conversation going, I'm going to invite Candyce to turn on her camera and join us now. Candyce has lived in Northern Saskatchewan, as I mentioned earlier, with, of course, her husband, Marius, for over 3 decades. She is happiest in the natural environment, tending to her garden, and has assisted in homeschooling her 2 children. Candyce has co-founded Reclaiming Our Youth Home Front School, where she has worked with many students. Hello, Candyce, and welcome.
Hi. Thank you for all the listeners out there. And I think I'm going to just jump right into the reasons for why there has been Indigenous resistance to uranium mining. Initially, they knew about the black rock. They knew that it could make people sick. The warnings were there. They were told, don't touch it. It will make you sick. That knowledge was ignored. Initially, uranium mining started because in Canada, they have high-grade ore. And during the Manhattan Project, most of the uranium that came to the United States came from Deline and the Northwest Territories. Then during the Cold War, they started mining it on the northern shores of Lake Athabasca. So Uranium City became a boom town overnight. There was hospitals and theaters and schools, but they used the waste from the mining to gravel the streets. And it eventually started making people sick. And they didn't want to admit that, so they started to shut down Uranium City. It wasn't because there was a lack of uranium at Uranium City anymore. It was because they needed to disperse the population. People in Northern Saskatchewan, the Indigenous people in Northern Saskatchewan, had no say over the matter. It was the war effort. It was the Cold War. Governments went in and they decided all this. During that time in the 1940s and 50s, things were pretty tough. People were still trying to recover from pandemics. So, but they did hear about the big bomb being dropped in Japan. And they did hear about that devastation and what it did. And they did hear that only widows lived in Deline by that time because all the men passed away. All the men that worked and labored in the mines hauled the ore onto the barges and actually slept on the barges as it was hauled to Fort McMurray to be put on trains. All those men died horrific, painful deaths. So they heard about these things, and it wasn't good. So the sickness was known. It was well known, and they were worried about what was going to happen. Then in the late 70s, they wanted to open more mines in Northern Saskatchewan. And my brother-in-law was actually in charge of a publication called Natatawin. And he and a bunch of others did a lot of work to try and educate Northern people about what these impacts from radiation were, what kind of health impacts they were going to be facing, what kind of cultural impacts they were going to be facing. And that publication got shut down, defunded, because it was impacting the government's ability to get the people on side. And that's kind of the way that things have gone. every time people stand up to trying to protect their lives, trying to protect their health, trying to protect their land, their water, they get government interference. So in 1980s, that interference was made into silence. They tried to silence people. But up in Wollaston, they made a blockade to stop the trucks. And they tried to use that time to share information, hand out pamphlets, so people would become aware, so the drivers would become aware. But that was one of the first resistances. Since that time, though, up here, it's been, they made their way in, and they promised prosperity. There was big meetings where they promised the whole North prosperity. But the North never really saw that prosperity. They'd been here for 60 years, 70 years. And the North has very few paved roads. It has very few business opportunities other than related to the mines. There's now, because of the closure at Uranium City, they decided that no further mines in Saskatchewan would have communities beside them. The miners are flown in and flown out. They spend 2 weeks in the mine, 2 weeks home. And for our northern communities and our northern peoples, this has been a problem because it's hard. It's having an impact on families. Initially, residential schools took children away from the parents, and now the parents are being taken away from their families for weeks on end. And so it has changed and affected how our communities operate and how our families operate. We haven't had time to heal from the residential school stuff, and now we're dealing with the mining impacts. So the concerns for people's health have been grave. We are starting to see more and more and more health impacts. Back in 1999, there was a study done on a food chain. And then it is obvious that the uranium mining has had an impact on the water and on the plants and on the air, because the animals are showing signs of radionuclides and heavy metals in their organs and in their meat. And back in 1999, they projected that this would begin to have impacts and cause cancers, like stomach cancers and that sort of thing. And we are starting to see those now. We are starting to see those in our people more and more. And when we take this information to the nuclear regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, we're told our people die younger. Well, all of the old people from our communities are of the age of the late 80s, 90s, 100s. Our people did not die younger. In the past, they died of natural causes like accidents or other things like heart attacks from all hard work. There was a lot of infant mortality. There was a lot of pandemics that took out people at an early age. It wasn't from cancers. Cancer is on the rise. Yet when we try to find information about that and what kinds of cancers, we're told only kind of cancer you need to worry about from mining is lung cancer. And a lot of your people smoke anyway, so we can't tell whether it's from smoking or from mining. So there's absolutely no compensation for miners. There's no compensation for our community members who are succumbing to these things. There is the uranium mining isn't just uranium mining. It's a whole nuclear fuel chain. So from here, the mills, grind it into yellow cake. And there's a lot of contamination from the mills. The mills are contaminating water and using a lot of water. And then safety levels are set to what the industry is able to clear, not what is actually truly safe. So it is impacting the flora and the fauna at a microscopic level, which means it's moving down the food chain. The industry doesn't actually do a very good job of mitigating that. All they have to do is monitor it. Monitoring just means watching it. And by the time it, they know it's going to take a long, long time for things to accumulate enough to be noticeable. By that time, they intend to be gone. We were told there was a mine spill, a mill spill that went through the floor of the molybdenum plant about 5 years ago. And that was based on the fact that the floor was contaminated with uranium. And they put water on the floor when they shut down, because there was a shutdown in the mines during COVID period and because of low markets. So they put water on the floor so that they wouldn't have to worry about the radon gas when people went in to monitor the machines. Well, they only monitored them once a month or something like that. And when they went in and they noticed there was no water on the floor, it had all seeped through the floor, a concrete floor, which was porous. All concrete is porous. Then they realized that it had traveled 15 meters already into the groundwater, and the groundwater was contaminated. We weren't informed of this for 6 months. When we were informed of it, they said, well, it's very slow moving. It's not going to affect the groundwater that far. And it'll take 30 years or so for it to get to the lake. But they didn't put forth any plan for cleaning it up. They didn't have standards for buildings. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission does not regulate building standards at uranium mills. What they had done was replace that surface of that floor once before, being cheap. Instead of replacing the whole thing, they just replaced the surface because it had leaked before. And we didn't know that until we were informed of this leak. And the fact that they were being cheap there was no response from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. So these are the regulators who are supposed to be protecting us, protecting our lands, protecting our water. And they are not really concerned because, these guys are going to be gone in 40 years. So after that, it's our problem. We live here. Now, trying to get information out about uranium mining and the hazards and the risks to the workers, the risks to the community members is really difficult because media has not wanted to cover these things. They're afraid of losing sponsorship. These mining companies sponsor a lot of ads. They sponsor medical research. They sponsor lots of things like scholarships for people. So this makes them, heroes in the eye of the general public. What they don't do is improve give us money for more teachers with high school qualification classes so our people can actually climb the ladder of being excellent, getting better opportunities, becoming better, having more opportunities right in our own area. So that's unfortunate. Now, what happens when that whole nuclear fuel chain, what comes out of the ground in Northern Saskatchewan is high-grade ore. Those rock tailings stay active until they bury them again. And they will continue to creep up to the surface over and over again. But down the chain, it's hauled away to places like Fort Hope, Blind River, and it's processed and made into nuclear fuel pellets. But they also process depleted uranium. And depleted uranium is used for what? It's used for nuclear weapons. So there's concerns about what this uranium is doing, not just in our backyard, in our home territories. It's what's happening to it down the line all over the world. Port Hope is one of the most contaminated towns in Canada. People there die of cancer regularly. Blind River is right next to the Serpent River First Nation. The effluents from the processing of uranium goes into their river. The average age of death around Serpent River is approximately 57 years old, and there's huge numbers of cancer. Almost everybody's dying of cancer. So it concerns us what's coming out of the ground here is impacting other places. It impacted everywhere around the world with all those nuclear tests the US did. It impacted Japan, where the nuclear bombs were dropped. It impacted Iraq, where depleted uranium was used. It's impacted and killed a lot of people. Prior to uranium mining, the world was at its least radioactive that it had ever been in the history of the planet, 4.7 billion years. Now that radioactivity has risen and risen and risen, and it's impacting across the globe. It's also impacting the climate. The question was asked, Beverly asked a question earlier. Do the treaties protect the territory, the land, and the water? No, they don't. They guarantee the rights of the Indigenous people. So whenever a company wants to explore for uranium, or they're doing an environmental impact statement, they say that it respects the rights of the Indigenous people. There's this consultation, free, prior, informed consent kind of thing goes on. The difference is your rights are no use if you have contaminated land, contaminated water, contaminated food sources. Your right is the only thing that's protected. And then there's the fact that each project, each mineral claim, each exploration site always is said to have very low impact on those rights. And okay, that's fine. But when you've got 30 projects going on in your territory at one time, at any given time, you're getting 30 projects coming across the desk in a month. That's how much exploration and intent there is to explore for uranium there is right now. Each of those ones asks for 30 days for you to respond. Now, if you don't get a response in 30 days, and it needs to be a technical science-based response, although they say they respect Indigenous knowledge, they want it in science terms. Well, our communities don't have that capacity to respond in that way with that many coming across the desk. By the time you get the information that they present to you, which is very, very minimal, you don't have time to give them the response, so they assume that you're okay with it. Environmental impact statements can be up to 600, 700 pages long. License reviews for the uranium mines are those equally as long. And you only get a short period of time to review it, go through it, and voice your concerns. We just went through at English River First Nation We just went through an environmental review on the environmental impact statement from Denison Mines, the Wheeler River project. It's a project where they want to use in situ leach recovery. In other words, a lot of water, a lot of acid, a lot of chemicals be pumped down into the ground to dissolve the materials and bring up the uranium. They also want to use freeze wall technology to hold it in place so it doesn't get in the groundwater. This project's to last maybe 20, 30 years. They are going to shut down the freeze walls. All of that stuff's going to get pumped back down into those cavities, and it'll continue to disintegrate. It will continue after those freeze walls go down to get into the water. There's absolutely nothing shown on the environmental impact statement to show that it is going to be taken care of. It is going to be watched. They are going to be able to mitigate it. They haven't got that information in there. They don't know what they're going to do with it, to be truthful. Just like they didn't know what they were going to do with the nuclear waste that comes from nuclear power plants. They've had 70 years to figure out what to do with spent nuclear fuel rods from power plants. Well, in 2011, we found out that they wanted to start, they were proposing to bury this in Saskatchewan. And the Saskatchewan government was all for the idea. They want the whole process in Saskatchewan from start to finish, from the uranium mines, nuclear power, processing, the whole thing. They wanted it all in Saskatchewan. People didn't necessarily want it in Saskatchewan, just the government. We found out that our community was buying for it. It was a total shock. We hadn't been informed. Nobody had been. Nobody was told until it was announced publicly. So when we found out, we organized a group called Committee for Future Generations. And we launched a campaign to fight against it because nuclear waste is not the same stuff that comes out of the ground as uranium. Some of those radioactive particles that are in nuclear waste will be radioactive for 4.7 billion years. They haven't got a sure solution, but they wanted to bury it in the ground in our traditional territory. So we ran a campaign from 2011 until 2014 to try to prevent nuclear waste from being buried in Saskatchewan. We united North and South, settlers and Indigenous people alike. We campaigned across our communities and our region. We had a petition, 12,000 people signed. Almost every person in English River First Nation signed that petition, except the leadership. Some of the things we did was try to find out when they were holding meetings so we could attend and ask questions. This was a form of resistance. We did the same thing in Pine House. We did the same thing in Creighton, where they were also planning. All were proposing and competing for this. Nuclear waste management organizations spent millions of dollars promoting this as an opportunity to bury the world's most toxic radioactive substance was supposed to be an opportunity. And then they tried to tell us it was our responsibility. They shouldn't have messed with it in the first place because they were trying to play God. You don't decreate an atom and expect to know what it was the creator could do. And they haven't been able to figure it out yet. To this day, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, we managed to shut them down. We did a walk from Pine House to Regina. Marius was one of the participants in that walk, as well as youth and elders from our region. And then we were joined by people from across Saskatchewan. By the time we got to Regina, there were hundreds of people. And then our youth, the following year in 2013, walked from Saskatoon all the way to Ottawa with the same concern. And they were asked to speak at Serpent River. And my son was one of the walkers. And he phoned me up from Serpent River and he says, "You're never going to guess where we're staying." I said, "I don't know." He said, "The Cameco Recreation Center." Cameco is the second largest uranium producer in the world. This is how they've pitched and been able to continue to do their business while making people in our Indigenous communities suffer. This is how they justify all of that. We've helped different groups just to the northwest of us. There was in 2014, there was a camp set up because there was so much uranium exploration going on in the area. People were upset. It was messing with the trap lines. It was preventing people from going hunting. They were being followed by helicopters if they went to their trap lines. All of this was denied by these companies. But as soon as we made it public, those helicopters ceased following them. Right now, though, in that area, we went to there was a camp where they blocked the road. The roadblock only lasted 14 days, and then the Department of Highways put on an court injunction on them. But the camp on the side of the road stayed in existence and made a presence known for over a year until the fires of 2015 burnt them out. During that time, in January, on a -30 day, we planned 4 days of meetings. The government of Saskatchewan was invited to attend. The day of the meeting, I did the media stuff for the group because where they were located, there was barely any cell service. There was barely any cell service and there was no internet access. So I did the communications, media, outreach. I also handled the letters for them. I got an email on the morning that the meeting was to begin. And it was from the government. And they said they weren't going to come. And I had to deliver that news to the group. And they were really, really upset. They said, "The government doesn't care about us." I said, "No, the government doesn't care about us."
Candyce, what was the reason the government came for not attending?
They only wanted to meet with the 2 core leaders, and they wanted to meet not at the camp. They wanted to meet indoors at a hotel an hour away. And basically, they didn't want to be on the land. They were told by the leaders that we want you to come. We want the land to hear your lies. We want your feet on the land as you're telling us these lies. What we had planned to do was that every single person who's attending the camp have their say and then let the government speak to that. They had no intention, none whatsoever. So the first night we met and everybody, 150 people, crammed into those 2 trapper tents that were set up end to end with 2 wood stoves going. It was -30. Every single person, youth to elder, spoke. Every single person wanted their land, the waters protected, and left alone. They wanted to be in control of their own lives on their own land. The next day, that night, we drove home because we lived not that far away. And we met truck after truck, empty flatbed trucks, heading north. The next morning, when we got back to the camp, all those trucks were heading south, filled with their heavy equipment. They were afraid we were going to block the road again. And they were yelling insults at the people that were standing outside of the camp. They were yelling at them, "Get a real job!" And the people were really upset. These people who don't come from here are telling them to get a job. I said, you guys are doing your job. You have a real job. Your job is to protect the land. You're doing it. That is your job. And you should be proud because you're standing up for it. Exploration slowed down to a stop for that duration of that camp. So in one way, it was somewhat successful.
Well,
Birch
at least you got
Narrows,
them thinking.
we did. Birch Narrows Dene Nation also during COVID caught some exploration company going through their community with heavy equipment, crossing the lake and going out on their traditional caribou hunting land to do exploration without ever having consulted the community. So during COVID at 30 below, they went out and made a camp on the land and they chased them out and wouldn't let them back in. So they were successful. They all got sick. They all ended up with COVID from having been, under that situation during that time, during the pandemic, but they stood to it. And I have to commend them for all of that.
Yes, not even just putting their bodies on the line, but also their health at that point.
Yes, big time.
That was probably before anyone had vaccinations too, right?
That was well before the vaccinations came out. That was at the beginning and the worst round of COVID. And it did actually, like their whole community ended up in a major outbreak after that.
Wow.
But they sacrificed big time.
The company getting the community even in a different way, right?
Right.
So Candyce, we get to move on. So if you could just give us your last and final thoughts.
Okay, well, I just wanted to mention consultation real quick. And consultation is a farce. Free, prior, informed consent is a farce. They only want to they want to tell us what they're doing so they can find how very little we will accept to let them do it. So they'll throw us a few comes called collaboration agreements, impact benefit agreements, and we don't really have a no vote on this at all. And that's the downside. We don't have environmental protections. And the standards that the Canadian government and the Saskatchewan government have are just, they're pitiful. And they are going to make the North into a sacrifice zone, even bigger than it was. Because there's a lot going on right now with the wars going on in Europe.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm gonna put pin there. I'm gonna hold that. I have some questions for the Q&A, and we're also still getting some questions from some of our viewers. So we are going to save those for the Q&A so everyone can speak to those. So thank you so much, Candyce. And now I'm going to welcome Leona Morgan to join us. She is a DNA activist and community organizer who has been fighting nuclear colonialism since 2007. She co-founded and is an organizer with No Hall. We'll put that link up in the chat so you guys can check out the site and what she's been working on. Leona is currently working to shut down a uranium mine that just started up near the Grand Canyon in Arizona. Most recently, Leona helped to stop national transport of high-level radioactive waste material from nuclear power plants and storage in New Mexico to Texas. So Leona's business working in our cousins' territories to the south, Leona, we're so happy you can join us and share your work. So please, Leona, the floor is yours.
I'm so happy to be here. I am going to do a presentation. If you could just confirm you can see everything all right. And
yes, I can see it. I think everyone else, Tori.
Okay, good. And then I'm sorry, just to do a quick time check.
Hello, Mama, you did well.
You can go ahead and just interrupt me if you need to.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll jump off the screen. When I come back, that's when I'll start bugging.
Okie doke. And maybe mute Marius. Oh yeah, hey everyone. Hello. She Twitch eating a schlit and Albany Bushes Chinkia Ani Dashache Tohoglina Dashanella. I am happy to be here. I'm coming I guess I'm here live from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I work on right now I'm really focused on uranium mining at the Grand Canyon, but I did a lot of work in the past on ISL mining. Candyce mentioned that. And then also consolidated interim storage of high-level radioactive waste from nuclear power plants. And I've been to the COP a couple times, so I might bring that up a little bit, the climate work. So right now, today, I just want to first highlight the issue that I'm working on. So I'm going to get into the Grand Canyon stuff, but just to kind of go back a little bit, the background of the whole issue of uranium mining, what is uranium used for, and all of that. I'll go over that in a minute. I'm just before I get into the nuclear energy side, I want to share this map. This is a screenshot from a website that you can see at the bottom. Stanford put out. They estimate there's about 20,000 abandoned uranium mines in the country. And so this is actually an interactive map. You can zoom in and out. Unfortunately, it's only the United States. So maybe there's a Canadian equivalent. Abandoned uranium mines. What are abandoned uranium mines? So I just wanted to start out with kind of a little bit of background. I wish I had my slide up. I forgot to add the slide with all of the policies, but just in a nutshell, going back to the doctrine of discovery from the 15th century, and then moving forward to different colonial laws. How did it lead to where we are today? So white. Right now, I just want to talk about nuclear colonialism and settler colonialism. And when we talk about land back and stuff like that, we have to understand the entire system we're living in, neoliberalism or neocolonialism or just capitalism, is based on this idea of ownership and commodification of Mother Earth. And so basically that they need resources. So they stole our land, they stole our resources and commodified them to do all kinds of stuff. And on Navajo, we consider our res like a resource colony because they mine coal, they mine, right now there's a lot of oil and gas development. Of course, uranium is what we're talking about. And then now they're talking about hydrogen and so-called new energy, which is basically the same idea of extracting and contaminating our lands. So yeah, going back to the doctrine of discovery and legalizing the theft of our land, some other policies similar to that, such as the mining law of 1872, and then other tools in the United States. I know in Canada, you guys also have a form of 1872 mining law, which makes it really hard to fight uranium mining. And so there's other things in the United States that aided settler colonialism, like the railroads and other things like the Dawes Act, which was a law that kind of divided and conquered the land. And actually, this was back in the 19th century, but it's still really impacting us today with what's called allotments and allottees. So anyways, going forward from land ownership, theft of our land, and then today, in the United States, uranium, because of that 1872 mining law, that was to encourage manifest destiny. And so it left a lot of abandoned mines across the whole country. Actually, over 600,000 of various types of mines. For uranium mining, we're talking about, there's an estimate between 15,000 and 20,000. So this website, it says about 20,000, and that's across the whole United States. On Navajo Nation, you can see this map. I didn't explain, this is the four corners right here. So Arizona, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and then here is the Navajo Nation. So on the Navajo Nation, this is one of the few places where they're doing cleanup of abandoned uranium mines. We estimate there's about 500, well, the US EPA estimates 523. Community people estimate a lot more. And so the reason they're called abandoned is because the mining that happened, the big uranium boom from the 1950s to the 70s, you know, it kind of went down in the 80s. That was all mostly unregulated. So in the United States, we didn't have the Environmental Protection Agency until the 70s. And so there really were no laws telling the companies to clean up and to, you know, clean up to this level, or to make sure the groundwater is safe, you know, safe to drink, you know, just basic things like this. These laws didn't really come about until the 70s. So that left all these abandoned uranium mines that the United States does not put any money to clean up. So we put trillions into new nuclear weapons and nuclear energy through like the decommissioning fund, and then just trying to build new nuclear power plants. Okay, so going from this map to what we're working on. So you can see, now you can see, okay, just where we are. Here's the four corners, Navajo Nation. So on the internet, you can zoom in and you can see all of the different locations. These are abandoned uranium mines. Just to orient us, there's a Flagstaff is somewhere about right here. This is the Grand Canyon. It says Grand Canyon National Park, and that's what I want to talk about next. I didn't put the map on this presentation, but just to give you an idea, around here, there's a lot of uranium claims. Again, going back to 1872 mining law, there's a lot of uranium underground that has been identified and is owned by various entities. It's not developed, but there are thousands of claims in this region, and then kind of like down here. So basically in the whole area, probably the whole United States, probably in Canada. I think some folks staked a claim at your parliament, was it? Okay, so anyways, abandoned uranium mines, a lot of dots here. These are all places that are contaminated in various stages of cleanup or no cleanup at all. Now, the issue that I'm working on personally, and also with a team of people, you know, there's three of us that started this organization. Well, a group. We're not technically an NGO, but we call ourselves Hall No. And so three of us founded the group in 2016. Today we have a lot of folks helping us out, lots of volunteers. Part of Hall No, all of us are working together to stop the mine. And so this map shows, when I say the mine, I didn't even explain the issue of the mine. So Hall No, just in our name, we're concerned about transport of uranium. And so there's a longer story talking about a national monument and a lot of other things, but I'm just going to skip to the gist of it. There's a uranium mine Hall No has been fighting since 2016. And some of our members have been watching it for more than 10 years. This mine, it was permitted in 1986, and it was basically fought in court by the Havasupai people. You can see the Havasupai Nation. They took their fight all the way as far as they could in through the legal system, and to the point where they basically couldn't take it anymore because of the current Supreme Court that was put in place by Trump, as everyone knows. So anyways, this mine has been challenged, resisted, monitored, all of that. And I'm really heartbroken to say that it actually started on January 8th of this year. So just a couple weeks ago. And what they're planning to do is extract a little bit of uranium. They're saying it's a small deposit, and they want to, only for 28 months, they want to take that uranium either on this route down from the mine. This is, again, Grand Canyon area, going south to I-40, and then up through the city of Flagstaff. And then around here, they'll enter the Navajo Nation. And our people, our Navajo Nation has a law against uranium mining and uranium transport, but these are US highways, so federal supremacy, I don't know. There's it's an interesting thing about our colonial systems. We can make laws, but they don't mean anything to the, within that colonial structure. So anyways, here, this is, we have a law saying no uranium, but that doesn't stop the company. That doesn't stop any transport, really. They would go and take it all the way up here to the uranium mill in Southeast Utah. This is the only uranium mill in the country that is operating. And so right now, this is the first mine to start in the Southwest. There's a few other mines in Utah. Well, I don't know the exact date that they started, but the Energy Fuels owns some other mines, and then there's some around the mill. But this is basically some of the first uranium activity that we've seen in a long time. And there is a very strong push from the federal government and internationally to mine uranium, because people think that it's a clean form of energy. So there's a lot of propaganda out there, especially to like some of our colleagues, like youth activists, climate activists. Some of them actually think this is a good idea to save the climate, but it's not, because uranium kills our people and it contaminates our water. And we all know all of that, because that's why we're here to talk about it. So this is the issue that Hall No is working on. We're trying to shut down the mine to prevent the transport. And then also the mill is a huge issue because it takes other waste and other nuclear materials and processes that. So if you overlay the two maps, you can see where the abandoned uranium mines are. And then there's all those new claims that are they're stopped because of this new national monument, but the Pinyon Plain mine and a couple others are grandfathered in. So if anyone heard about this new national monument around the Grand Canyon, it does stop mining in about nearly 1 million acres, but not for 11 mines, and maybe half of them can start. Right now, we're really concerned about 3 of them. So Pinyon Plain is right here, and they would transport the uranium down here around Flag and then through the res. And the very first community that they would encounter is called Cameron. So the Cameron chapter actually has, like, out of those 523 mines I mentioned earlier, abandoned mines, so 523 AUMs in Navajo, and about a quarter of them, more than 100, are in Cameron alone. So you can see all of those dots. So this is already a place that's highly contaminated, doesn't want the community. Obviously, all of these communities don't want more uranium coming through. That's why we have a law. But because on August 8th, President Biden made a national monument around the Grand Canyon. Let me just go back to this map. Here is the Grand Canyon. So there's about 1 million acres somewhere up here, two areas. I'm sorry, I can get another map in a minute or put it in the chat. But this 1 million acres, nearly 1 million acres is protected from uranium mining forever. So it stops all of those claims that are not developed, maybe would never be developed, but it doesn't stop the biggest threats, which are Pinyon Plain, and then the other handful of others. So I just wanted to put the maps together so you can see what an already impacted area this is and what they want to do. And so our crew, we've been monitoring them since, like I said, some folks since more than 10 years ago. Probably, I don't even know when they started, but our team, Hall No, all of our members and volunteers that are helping, some of them go out to the mine. A couple of these pictures I took myself because we were, we go to the mine, we see what's going on, and one time, this picture here, you can see there's some spraying of something going into the air. That's actually water. I guess the mine was filling up with water, so the company they thought they can evaporate it, so they just started spraying it into the air, and we caught them. We went out there and we took these pictures, and then we submitted them to the regulatory agency. And basically, it was, I'm just summarizing or paraphrasing, but basically they said to us, "Oh, thank you for notifying us. We'll update their permit so they're in compliance," kind of thing. So this is the regulators. They also said something like, "We don't deny permits, we regulate." So that's another, kind of thing that we've heard from the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. So that's the picture. I'm sorry, that's the picture of the water spraying. They were hauling that extra water that they couldn't get rid of in trucks to the mill. It was highly contaminated with uranium, but the trucks were marked for oil and gas. And then this picture of the tractor turned over, this is just from last Friday. And of course, we're reporting it. This picture here, this is from January 9th. So our team took, this is the new uranium that just came out of the ground, and it's really easy to see on the top of the snow. So there's actually 6 piles of low-grade uranium. They haven't reached the high-grade uranium yet, so we don't know when they will start transport. There's no regulation for them to notify us and communicate really with the public about what's going on. So we're relying on what we get, what we're hearing from the U.S. Forest Service, that is basically like a cheerleader for energy fuels. I mean, they call themselves landlords, but yeah, they're more like party buddies to me. So yeah, I kind of mixed up my slides here. I'm gonna, okay, let's do this. So the nuclear fuel chain, right here, this is I'm going to skip topics now, totally shifting to, let me actually just stop the share. So one of the other things I mentioned is that there's a strong push for nuclear energy now, and that has to do with the recent, a couple of things. There's a strong push for new uranium because of this false notion that nuclear energy is clean or renewable or is going to save us from the climate disaster, which it is not. And so this is what I'm going to show you in a minute is why it's not. But recently, in November last year, President Biden, he called for the United States, he committed that the United States would triple their nuclear development by 2050 in order to help with climate change. And then he got 21 other countries to join him. So that's 22 countries committed to triple nuclear energy development by 2050. And so that's not even counting nuclear weapons. And so on top of that, recently the price of uranium just went, the spot market price went over $100 a pound. And that is causing a lot of the companies to want to start mining again. And so there's a lot of things happening in the United States as well in our Congress. In December, through the passing of this thing called the National Defense Authorization Act, there was an attachment to that called the Nuclear Fuel Security Act, which basically, supports the development of more uranium, which is nuclear fuel. In that same National Defense Authorization Act, the United States had a chance to fund compensation for people who have been hurt by uranium mining, to expand that compensation to people who were bombed by the first nuclear test, which is the Trinity test in New Mexico. And it almost passed through both sides of Congress, and then it didn't. So the United States is basically funding more death and destruction while taking away compensation dollars for the people that it killed. Essentially, that's what happened when they didn't continue RECA. RECA still has a couple more months if folks can get something together. That it has until July this year before it completely sunsets. So RECA is the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. So that's highly problematic. So just going back to finish up the presentation on with the slides. So the reason why nuclear energy is not a solution to climate change. This here, it shows the different stages of nuclear energy development. And there's a place where nuclear energy and nuclear weapons split, but basically they both come from uranium, and they both need nuclear reactors and a lot of the same stuff. So really, you can't separate nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. So up here we have the exploration of uranium. We call this the front end of nuclear energy development, or the nuclear fuel chain. We don't call it a cycle because it's not something that can be recycled. Reprocessing is a very dirty and expensive process as well. So reprocessing is not recycling. And all of this is super expensive. Somebody said once, and I like to repeat, that nuclear energy is just the most complicated, expensive way to boil water. So just a huge waste of money. And it takes a long time to build these things, and it's super expensive. And so starting again with uranium mining, they take the uranium out of the ground through different processes. Candyce mentioned ISL. Pinyon Plain is a conventional mine, so they have to take the uranium ore to process at a mill. And so the mill is where they make the yellow cake, and then there's a lot of different steps. I think 20 total steps. I'm not an expert on all of them, but in New Mexico, we have quite a few of them. We have the only enrichment facility in North America. So at the enrichment plant, this is where you concentrate the uranium, and this is where you can either concentrate it enough for nuclear energy to use in power plants, or for nuclear weapons. So again, we got one of those in New Mexico, and then 2 nuclear labs. So I'm located in Albuquerque. There's a lot of nuclear stuff in New Mexico, like WIP and the Trinity site. But tonight I'm focusing on the Grand Canyon, which is next door in Arizona, just to give folks an idea. Where we are in the Southwest. Okay, so going back to this nuclear fuel chain, starting with uranium, and then all the different processing, and then ending up down here at the power plant. This is where they use the nuclear fuel, the nuclear fuel rods, which have the uranium pellets in it. And yeah, I know I skipped a bunch of steps, but the point of this is to show that each stage it produces a different type of radioactive waste. And most of it, we don't really have places to put it. And so a lot of it's sitting at the places where it was created. Some places, there's some radioactive waste dumps in different states. But essentially, White Mesa Mill is being used kind of like a nuclear waste dump, because it's processing other stuff, and then it keeps the waste on site in these tailings ponds and things like that. So the tailings come from the mill. Waste rock comes from the mine. And then earlier I mentioned high-level radioactive waste. So that's these long spent fuel rods is what we're calling them here, irradiated nuclear fuel rods. This is what they put in the nuclear reactor, and then it, makes the electricity. And right now we have, Candyce was mentioning how much we have with nowhere to put it. We just fought 2 proposed dumps for this stuff in New Mexico and Texas, and we stopped both of them. So in the US, there's nowhere to put this waste, which will be radioactive basically forever. and needs to be contained and taken care of forever. So going back to why nuclear is not a solution to climate change, all of the stuff that happens in the front end, the transport of uranium, and this is international, this is global, this is not just happening in, they're not just taking uranium from here to there, it's going all over the world. And that's all fueled with fossil fuels, and powered by, coal-fired power plants and different things like that. There's no nuclear power plant fueling this stuff, so it's all coming from other energy sources. And that's not counted when they say nuclear energy is carbon free. And so they only count the carbon footprint here at the nuclear power plant, which mostly emits steam and, again, boiling water. So it's steam, radioactivity, and heat. They don't count all of the stuff before and all of the stuff after, which is not being funded to clean up. And then again, like I said, this waste down here needs to be kept safe forever, which is really, I don't know if that's even possible for us as humans, and of course would require a lot of energy as well. So that is conveniently not counted in the carbon footprint. So yeah, that's why nuclear energy is not going to save us from the climate disaster. It's too dirty, too dangerous, too slow, too expensive. And then just going back to the previous slide, Hall No is fighting this. If people want to support us, go to our website, hallno.com. And yeah, can chat now and take some questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leona. I did have a question for you. When you were showing those pictures that had just like the piles of low-grade uranium like laying around, like how dangerous is that to have that just lying like on the ground where wind and rain can get to it?
That's a good question. I mean, that's not processed. It's you can see there's snow, so there's probably some movement, when the snow melts and things like that. I have no clue because we're not trying to get close to it to measure the radiation.
Of course not.
There's radon gas coming off of that constantly.
So the whole site is radioactive. It's got higher readings, and like especially they were spraying the water, but right now that's all not processed yet. And so I imagine whatever they're bringing out, that's what they call low grade ore. So they're still trying to bring out the high grade ore. So even that, we don't know how much more radioactive it will be. And they're saying they're going to transport it in trucks covered with tarps, and that it's not going to contaminate. And exactly. It's safe and all of that. And so that's what we're dealing with down here.
Really, they're trying to claim tarps is gonna keep that contaminant safe while they transport
in the wind.
That's wild. That's wild.
Well, they say they're bolted down. If you go to our website, we got a picture of one of those trucks. And so I'll put in the chat as well, a presentation of the Forest Service. We don't hear from the company really. It's like the Forest Service is protecting them. And so there's this video I'll put in whenever folks, if they want to watch a 45-minute video, it's very painful to see how little government knows, and then also how much the federal government is protecting industry. So it's so clear in this video. Basically, the Forest Service is the one that's the landlord of the mine. It's kind of watching it, but they're not really doing anything except kind of protecting it, in my perspective.
And that excludes accidents. So back in 1984, I believe, there was a yellow cake truck pulling from up here, got hit by a train, and it spilled all that yellow cake. And that whole area, a square mile, had to have all the soil removed, all the rail tracks removed, all the rail cars removed, and all of the damaged truck. And I hauled it all back up to Key Lake Mine and dumped it in the tailings pit. And the haul trucks that they used to haul it also got dumped in. And there was nothing, and that's, in the wind. And there was nothing about that in Canada. There was no information. There was nothing in the CNSC archives. There was in North Dakota, and there was reports from mill workers and mine workers from that Key Lake mine that told us about it. So, you know, and then there was a spill again by Swift Current, Saskatchewan, one winter. So it spilled out onto the road, onto the ditch, and they covered it with a tarp until the CNSC got there to clean it up. And they said there was nothing to worry about. Well, that's their word, but I wouldn't guarantee that.
Come on, Candyce, they use a tarp. Not funny, but you know, it's not funny.
Exactly.
But we do have a question from Steve off our YouTube channel. He was wondering what the insurance cover, if anyone, or you guys may or may not know, but what the insurance coverage regards to incidents around shipments, widespread contamination. Is there a database for background contamination?
There is no
and what is the
insurance.
cost? The government is not
no
keeping track of
insurance on
costs.
any radioactive accidents at all. So if your car gets that radioactive dust on it and you get sick from it, you're not insured.
Do they keep that kind of information or track that in the US, Leona?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Do they keep track of, like, you know, when they're hauling it and there's an accident and there's contamination? Do they keep track or keep any of that data in the US for those kinds of incidents?
I mean, I think most stuff is self-reported, and so if they're not caught, they're not going to report it. And so if people, like, I know the people at the mill, so the mill I showed is at the end of the route, and this is their story. So I mean, it is something, it's not documented. They said one of the trucks they dumped over a bunch of uranium at the entrance to the mill, and then this was in the middle of the night. I guess there was an accident, and then they just paved over it. So by the next morning, it was all paved over.
Wow.
I hear Marius laughing.
Yeah, that sounds like it.
We reported the tractor at the mine that's turned over, but who knows if they reported it themselves. I mean, today it wasn't there. It wasn't, the tractor obviously wasn't still upside down. So it's our word against theirs. And so I think it's really, that's why for Hall No, we did this action and awareness tour in 2017. We went on the whole haul route and we did presentations in the communities that we could schedule. The ones that were along the haul route, we were focusing on those, and the ones we were able to get together folks. We did a presentation on the stuff, the stuff I just told you about the mine, some health, what are the health effects, what are some of the health impacts, and then also direct action. So ways people can actually try to stop it. Because in the end, like I was saying, our colonial structures are going to fail us if our tribal governments don't go outside of those. So right now, like the Navajo Nation's just, you know, oh, you know, we don't have jurisdiction and our treaty and blah, blah, blah. So you know, until they actually say, no, we make laws, you know, until they stand up to the outside governments, you know, maybe something will change. Right now, they're not doing that.
Well, let's hope something changes eventually.
Yeah. And then
sooner than later.
And the companies are not obligated to tell anybody when they start transport. I think they need to tell the Forest Service, but there's really, I know there's a notice. Some places say they require 4 days notice. Right now, I have no idea. I mean, it's very unclear what notice is required and who they're supposed to notify, because when the mine actually started, the Forest Service didn't notify the tribes until late the next day. So that's not giving them, I mean, that's for the mining at the mine. But if they were to start transport, and I don't know if you know, a day late is adequate. It should be way ahead of time.
For sure,
Regarding transportation, Oh, sorry, Marius, go ahead.
Just hang on. I was just reading up an article from the Black Hills Water Alliance, and it showed a map of the Black Hills area where there's just a lot of contaminated areas. Now, when they write about it, they only write about it to inform. They don't warn. So there's that communication someplace is not connecting. So a lot of people go to the Black Hills. Candyce and I were in the Black Hills, not too far from where we went, just to see Mount Rushmore, Crazy Horse Mountain. Not far from there were radioisotopes that were very, very high according to that map. So if you want to find out more information on the Black Hills Water Alliance, just Google it and you will see. The matter of all those, Gordon Edwards had said, the chain is our things. Mining is a thing. Uranium ore is a thing. Plants, factories are things. But what they forget to what they omit is that it is all unleashed properties. So there is no way anybody can have such a smell or even a presence of a danger unless you have a Geiger counter or one of those. The miners wear them on their clothing to indicate if they are getting too high of a reading. My brother worked up in McArthur River, and they had to keep him. They wouldn't release him after his 10 days of work period. I think they had to keep him for about another 7 days. And then when he came here, I took a Geiger counter to him, and it was just, you could just hear the cackling. The Geiger counter was picking up some presence of a property. You can only read 6 different types of property. So we don't, unless we plug it into a computer and get some kind of data on it, that we would be able to see what type of properties are hitting. So that's got to be understood for most anyway, that we're dealing with properties that nothing can contain. It destroys containers. It'll blend and bond with geographical regions, with water. One scientist described a method that they had wanted to do where they were going to dig under Lake Huron, and that scientist said, if you do that, you can get I give an analogy that if you put any colored dye in a pool of water, that pool of water will be that colored dye in no time. So that's the nature of the way a radio or transuranic will unleash many different types of material, lethal material.
Yeah, so like it sounds like it's really, if not impossible to contain, and it doesn't even sound like they're working very hard to contain this if they're just, covering up their tracks. But I wanted to move on. We had a really great comment or a question from Pamela on our Facebook feed. She says, in so many industries, we see the ethics of corporations is very low. We are dealing with an approved nuclear waste site in Ontario along the Ottawa River. Is there any way to hold a mirror to these corporations or to the people working there? Is there any advice for Pamela, maybe what she can do in her area with these corporations?
Basically with the Chalk, that's from the Chalk River. And what they've done now is the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission has approved that they can bury the nuclear waste that's there. This was waste from a plant that they used for making medical isotopes. They also did a lot of experiments there. So initially, that was contained in pools. Now they want to bury it subsurface. So it means build something over top of it. And like she's worried, you know, and what Marius described there was it is going to eat through its containments. They cannot guarantee that it will be contained, and it's very close to the Ottawa River. And Ottawa, the city, is downstream, as is Montreal. Anyway, that what she can do is join some of the groups that are fighting against it. She can also look up the First Nation that lives right near there, because they're fighting against it, and support them. Because ultimately, when it comes to the burial of nuclear waste, and if Nuclear Waste Management Organization has anything to do with it, then they have the veto on it. That's the only thing we have veto on as Indigenous peoples, is the burial of nuclear waste. So they are fighting hard. And maybe I'm not familiar with the names of the Ontario First Nation that is there, but she could definitely check that out. I think it's one I have a hard time pronouncing. But
it's the Algonquin Nation.
Yeah,
the Algonquin
the
Nation.
Algonquin people. Zibi? Is Zibi a... maybe you know, Tori, I'm not sure. Anyway, that would be one of the things that she could do.
Well, I guess that's a start. And like, yeah, I guess everyone, it doesn't matter where you live, if they're gonna start sticking it in your backyard, it should be concerned. And that's wild to me that they would stick it upstream from Ottawa and Montreal, such large populations.
Well,
right
it
beside
is
the
there
river.
now. That's the thing.
It's crazy to me.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's all around Toronto area, all around there. It's all on site.
Yeah, so because all the waste that's ever been expended through the entire process of nuclear power has to be stored somewhere, right?
Right now, though, I can tell you one short thing about the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. When they were in our community promoting this, I asked them why they would haul it all the way across 3 provinces, across the country, and bring it all the way up here. And she said, the people of Toronto don't feel safe. That told me it's not safe. And that told me we were considered expendable. And that is the risk. And when it comes to transporting nuclear waste, they won't tell you when it's being transported. They won't tell you what route it's going on. The security on that is going to be sky high, because that's a dirty bomb in the making.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just a matter of time before that goes horribly wrong. I do have another great comment / question from our Facebook, Dr. Lynn Gell. Sorry, Lynn, if I'm saying your last name wrong. Do you think some people stand behind the nuclear industries because their allegiance is based on economics versus ideology? And what can we do to challenge that?
I definitely say so. It is when we see them in our communities, our communities are divided now into haves and have-nots. Those that work in the mines make big money, but they pay high risk. They're at high risk. And our communities are permanently kept, like our First Nations communities are kept poor and in crisis, and underfunded. So we have to accept these things from the industries. So it is an economic interest. And even when we get collaboration agreements or impact benefit agreements, the majority of that is in contracts to service the industry. So they're pimping us, basically. They're pimping our people into servitude to the industry.
So is there anything people can do at the community level to to help fight the fact that the people who support it are just supporting it because it gives them jobs? Like, what can people do to fight that? Or has the mining companies completely succeeded in making communities dependent on them in this way?
One of the things we're working towards is setting our own environmental standards. Now, it's not gone it's not gone anywhere yet, but this is something we're really promoting, setting our own environmental standards so that we can force mitigation, not monitoring, but mitigation. We can do our own monitoring as well, because we don't trust industry, we don't trust government. And that's becoming clearer and clearer. And even when it comes to studies, they won't do health studies. We can't get a health study done. So.
Candyce, we are getting close to the end of the time, but I did want to ask you a question. You mentioned earlier that the companies and the health professionals were discussing lung cancer was a big thing, and then they're trying to say, oh, but your people smoke anyway. What are some of the other cancers that seem to be popping up? Leona and Marius, jump in here, in areas where these sites are. There's got to be other different types of cancers, like other than lung, because you don't really hear about the cancers that are in these areas.
Leona, do you want to cover what kinds of illnesses were under that covered in that compensation in the United States?
Yeah, actually, that's what I was trying to pull up to put in the chat. The Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, or RECA. It does cover certain illnesses. So there is a direct connection between different sicknesses, because obviously they're paying to compensate people with these illnesses. I'm trying to pull up the whole thing.
I know there's about 40 illnesses that they covered in the United States.
There's pulmonary fibrosis, that's a lung thing, and so through some new studies, they do show different autoimmune diseases. And so it's not just cancer. I mean, we can go back to the chemical effect or the radioactive effect. But I think just one of the most alarming things that people like to talk about is, I don't like to talk about it, but one of the most shocking things in one of the recent studies from the Navajo birth cohort study out of UNM, actually here in Albuquerque, and Strick did a lot of work on this, Southwest Research and Information Center. Anyways, the study shows that there's high levels of uranium in the urine of newborn babies. And so this is across the res on Navajo, not just in contaminated places. And so we don't know, I'm not sure what other studies are in the works for those impacts, but through Southwest Research and Information Center, there was also this thing called the DNEF project, and they took samples from different people and also showed the effects of long-term exposure living at these places. So even though it's a low-level exposure, living there, they're proving these things. Whereas the people can just tell you about their personal, anecdotes that are not studied. There's people that talk about miscarriages and the brain
birth defects.
This is a community research. Sorry, my camera's blurred, but it's a community health impact assessment. So basically this group, they put together their own interviews and they, did their own kind of study. So there's different levels of health studies that people can do, like just basic research, pulling together data, and then getting all the way into advanced, taking human tissue and studying it and stuff like that. And I think all of that is very, how do you say? It's just we're at the tip of the iceberg. We don't really know I don't think any of us know the impacts to our plants and our animals and all the non-human relatives and things like that. Our sacred sites. I don't know how you would measure the impacts of radioactive contamination to our medicine, or, I mean, obviously you don't want to use those, so that impacts our ability to practice our culture and things like that. But I just wanted to go back real quickly. You said how to fight these things. I think for us, like I said, we did that tour. So that educated people on the haul route where people were impacted. And then when we did this education, you know, first of all, it got them interested and they learned about the stuff, but also they were posting on social media. So a lot of people were taking pictures of trucks, and that was actually helping us to identify some of these things happening, because there's only so many of us. So if you get everybody paying attention, like Marius was talking about, radiation monitoring and things like that, if the community is doing stuff themselves, we don't really trust the company or the government to monitor or to report or to inform us. So it's really good when we do community education stuff like what you guys are doing now, and then get people to help monitor, help watch the roads, go to city council meetings, watch I don't know what you guys have. We have the federal registrar and the NRC, watching all of their stuff. There's some good websites, like the WISE Uranium website is really good. That usually has a lot of current information. I'll put that in the chat too. So anyways, yeah, I think the most important thing for me is education. And then after that, there's all kinds of different ways you can take action.
Yeah, I think social media is a really great thing if people can start holding them accountable and forcing them to, like, declare that their tractor tipped over or something because we have a photo of it. Anything like that, and people in communities, I guess, can help. It is time. But before I go ask for last thoughts, I did have one question for Candyce and Marius. Are people still harvesting up north in Saskatchewan? Are people still taking food off the land, or is that kind of started to dwindle away?
Okay, there is a cultural camp located, I think it's 60 clicks south of the large Key Lake mine, where there's huge open pit. The people go there every fall time. They go hunting moose, pick berries, do their usual ancient activities. So the people still do that, even though we try to say maybe it's not going to be so healthy anymore. You should stay away from there. And as for us who know what it's like to trade fisticuffs with those goons that the corporates hire, we don't want to go close to those places because they're very, very contaminated, very dangerous. So you can't really set any roadblocks. The only roadblocks that can be set would be quite a ways away. And then even then, now that it's been in operation since the 1950s, so the spread, the gradual bonding spread of the whole of the radioactive material is all over. You can get washes, you can read washes from our Geiger counter here. When it's forest fire, we take the Geiger counter out and it just reads like the trees that are burning, and as well as other forest fauna that is burning is also contaminated. So the Geiger counter can actually pick it up. So when it comes to a lot of ways of trying to keep ourselves safe, we can't really confront them because, like I said, they can kill you. When I went for a top dog position for CEO of the Key West and Yata Health region, I mean, if all those, oh man, some of those very, very, very dynamic type of people that were vying for that position, and they awarded it to me, but only because I was asked by the interviewers about uranium mining impact on health and how it was making the Socrates oath. Is that what it's called? The Socrates oath for
Hippocratical oath.
Yeah, the oath that doctors make to preserve life. Yeah, the medical profession were kind of in a quandary because they also were realizing that there was a lot of health impacts, cancer, diabetes, heart attacks, all kinds of illnesses, dementia too. That's starting to hit out too, and that's also being looked at seriously because many of our people up here are coming down with Alzheimer's and are just losing sense of their awareness. But taking into consideration that standoff where we know that we have these health studies that we've been looking at for the last 40, 50 years saying there is a serious health question here, and that is not being addressed. And because they don't want to, especially when some of those people in Toronto that represented us and they faced off with the nuclear regulatory body, the CNSC, they challenged the CNSC as to what do you mean by protecting the human DNA? Now, there was a big kerfuffle about the whole thing, and all those panel sitters are using all this fancy language words that didn't mean nothing. But after that interaction, that word was taken off, protection of the human DNA. The DNA was where the main source of life was. It was where everything was created to function the organism, to function the human being. That was where everything, like it's just so like a little card you stick into a computer. That's all I can say about that. But that was being damaged. And one of the ways that it was described was if, or Scientific American, I think was what described the way radioactive material would make havoc of the human DNA, akin to a Brahma bull led into a fine chinaware shop and just whacked and then raised the bull and just smashing everything to pieces. So that was the analogy that was used.
Well, it sounds like uranium mining and other resource extraction companies are trying to smash the world to pieces. But on that note, we are at time. So I just want to thank you so much, Marius and Candyce and Leona, for sharing the hard work that you guys do behind the scenes, for sharing your knowledge. I know I learned a lot tonight. I want to thank Tori for looking after everything on the back and making sure everything ran smoothly. A big thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. This is actually the first installment in a 4-part series on uranium that Keepers of the Water will be doing. So please join us again on February 13th when we'll discuss small nuclear modular reactors and consent in Saskatchewan, what you haven't been told. Check back with Keepers of the Water and all our socials. We'll give updates. This webinar will be uploaded and it'll be shareable. And we have added all the chats that were mentioned or all the links that were mentioned in our chat. So if you want to go and check out all of those, please check out Hall No. Leona's work is pretty amazing, and she's doing some crazy extensive work in the US. And you know that these things you know are affecting us everywhere. Even if you don't live beside a site, you might have a truck driving through your town. So we all should be concerned. And you know, they're putting it beside rivers. So again, thank you everyone for giving us your evening and coming out and learning. And like Leona, Candyce, and Marius said, education, keeping them accountable, and talking to our governments is the only way that we're ever going to be able to move forward. So thank you everyone, and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks. Bye. Good night.
All right. Thanks. Nice working with you, Leona, again. And thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.